Alright, welcome back to the Daily Vent. I'm trying a bit of a different mic setup this time. I got a lav mic just out of frame on the shirt, so hopefully that will give a bit of a better overall quality compared to last time. So I'm going to try to speed run some stuff before bed here. I got like a lot of different notes and stuff from over the last probably 2 or 3 years to go through. And so we're just going to do a series of live streams until that gets completed, and as well as like probably continue on past that point too. So the next current note that I'm on here is since we are in, so I probably wrote this note in probably 2021. So this is just one of the things that probably came to mind at the time. Since we are in the age of 5th generational warfare, what if the modern day space race or arms race is the news race, or the info race / wars, where it is the battle for information supremacy, info control? I mean, this is obvious, it's already taking place, and I hear the establishment is losing. And then I have like in brackets reference Joe Rogan podcast with Michael Malice. I guess maybe Michael Malice has been on Joe's show probably several times. So this is probably an episode from 2021 or 2022. Probably 2021, because that's when more of the COVID stuff, at least in Canada, was still pretty prevalent. And I mean, there's probably some level of it in the US, but I think it was more based on which state you were in, right? And then the note continues, it may not seem like it because the narrative can seem so powerful, but hopefully people can critical think even a little and see through the lies and the cringe. So, as far as I remember, 5th generational warfare is essentially information warfare, right? So if you're talking, I believe, I'm pretty sure, I assume, it's about like propaganda and stuff of that likeness. So it's about, as far as I understand, from what I can remember, information, control of information, narratives, things like that. So the modern, like the parallel here, because like the arms race, and I'm not like a very well-read historian or anything, but as far as I understand, the arms race was to see who could, well, actually, you know what, let's just go to the interwebs real quick here and just ask AI, what was the arms race? Okay, based on the provided search results, an arms race is a pattern of competitive acquisition of military capability between 2 or more countries. It is a situation in which 2 or more nations continually try to get more and better weapons than each other, often reflecting an adversarial relationship. So, as far as I understand, it was, okay, yeah. It involved the United States and the Soviet Union. Racing to produce more advanced and larger quantities of weapons, including missiles and nuclear arsenals, which heighten tensions and fears of military conflict. So the arms race refers to a competition between nations, particularly during the Cold War, to develop and accumulate weapons, especially nuclear arms, in order to assert a military dominance. Right, so how does that compare to modern day when it comes to, like, there's this one guy that wrote a book, How We Win the Third World War Without Firing a Single Shot, something like that. He was on Tim Pool's podcast a while ago. They may have talked about 5th generational warfare on that show. But essentially it's like, if you can control the narrative and kind of influence the thought of the masses and convince and influence and direct people with words and messaging, then you don't even really need to point a gun at people to get them to do stuff. And so we kind of lived through that time during COVID where you could argue the messaging was so strong. And it's one of those things that might make you think that things might be looking bleak in terms of narratives and how willing people are to critically think. And it's even maybe beyond the critical thinking, but just being willing to critical think and also be like ostracized for it, like being willing to go through the social beat down, so to speak, of like being the odd one out, right? That was kind of like, I think it would be referred to as ostracizing. I think think that's the term. We're just going to look that up here.
Ostracize.
To exile by ostracism, banished by popular vote, a person's dreaded for their influence or power were banished by the ancient Athenians. So you kind of like, you banish them by popular vote. So like when you have that mob rule, right? And so that, how many people remember what COVID times were like, where it's like if you didn't want to get the shot, I don't know if you're allowed to say vaccine on YouTube anymore. Well, you're allowed to say, but like, will the video automatically become deboosted or whatever if you do say it? Regardless, if you were even like vaccine skeptical, you might have just been labeled anti-vax, and it might be a little bit hard to remember exactly what all the narratives were at the time, but there's probably something along the lines, some people may have implied at the very least that, like, if you didn't want to get the vaccine, then you're going to risk killing grandma or whatever they said, something probably hyperbolic and reaching or whatever. And in some cases maybe that was true, but even if there is risk of that, so first of all there's going to be a risk of that regardless because of waning efficacy over time. How effective really was it? Was it even really a vaccine, or was it more like a therapeutic? All these questions, and even just raising these questions at the time was probably something that would maybe get you ostracized by certain groups or kind of be referred to negatively by the mainstream media. And so the ability to control narratives and influence people, like obviously like heavy duty arsenals and weapons and artillery and etc. is still very much a thing. That's kind of a baseline means of warfare, but you don't even have to go to the nukes or whatever if you can just convince people to go along with your plans or lie to them to get them to go along with it, whatever. So I think like one of the things that I mentioned later on here after but hopefully people can critical think even a little and see through the lies, and I said and the cringe, because what's interesting is with some of this stuff, this might be a sign that they're kind of losing or hopefully losing, is that some of the stuff that they put out there is just cringe. Like, and so you kind of don't really maintain dominance as easily if your side is cringe. It's like kind of some basic human psychology. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it's like if you're cringe, people are probably not as likely to want to group up with you and follow along if it's cringe. Now, in some cases, they might do it even if it's cringe because they're afraid of being ostracized or whatever else, the social classes, etc., being kicked out of your group of homies because you don't think like they think or whatever. But you could argue maybe we've become so siloed as a society into these kind of thought groups, and you're not really allowed to, or depending on your group, you might not be allowed to kind of have dissenting opinions or varying opinions. And so doesn't make for good society. Like, how ought we to live together, to quote something that Jim Caviezel said one time. And so if we can't like just have civil discussion, like where does that go to? Like does everything become a fight? And this is the interesting thing, because like with certain topics people say, oh, that's political, right? Like, but like think of an example that's classically political. Like maybe it's like abortion's considered probably a very political topic. Gun rights is probably considered, or gun ownership maybe just considered a political topic. The LGBTQ, etc., etc., is probably considered a political issue on some level or whatever. Like, pick one. The interesting thing, like when I think I came to this realization, or started to, a couple years or so ago, roughly, where it's like people will say a certain issue is political and kind of want to shy away from it because they don't want to step on any toes, or they don't want to get into any confrontation or difficult discussions or make people mad, whatever. They don't want to have a fight. But what's kind of interesting and what's happening, and people in power may have caught on to this, that it's like if you just make everything that matters a political issue, then you kind of maybe prevent some people from talking about it that don't like confrontation. And maybe that's kind of the unfortunate genius behind it, is it's like if you don't want people to talk about illegal immigration, you make it a political topic. Now that one's maybe not the best example because it's already kind of a political topic because immigration, etc. But like pick something that's kind of normal. Like, so religion, people might say, well, that, like, I mean, religion and politics are kind of like in their two separate categories, and they're like said like the two things that you should never talk about is religion and politics. And then I've heard somebody say like the two most important things like are those things, right? And religion in terms of faith being more important than the political, but the political still having ramifications. And so, all that said, if you want people to not talk about something, you could just make it a political issue, and that might work to some degree on the people that are averse to confrontation. So, like, what's the solution? You might just have to be willing to grow more of a spine and this goes for me as well, and have tough conversations, and being willing to go there and try to do so, like, cordially or, lovingly. And I'm just going to define cordial real quick. Just want to make sure I got the right word here. Okay, define cordial based on the provided search results. There's no... Is it cordial? You don't get to see my bad spelling. Okay, so it's cordial. Warm and sincere, friendly, polite and respectful, formally pleasant, right? So as long as you can try to have conversations in this kind of manner, lovingly, and maybe it's not always possible to do that, but like we should try to do all things lovingly. You got to just be willing to do it, like to go there, have the tough talks about the things that matter. Because if no one talks about anything ever that matters, where do we end up as a society? We may already be seeing the ramifications of that. Whether you want to talk about, the transing of the kids, etc., etc. And you could actually have, like, even if you're not like a religious person, you could have a reasonable conversation about how, like, hey, shouldn't you at least wait till they're 18, even if you don't agree with the whole trans thing? It's like, well, like, why are you pushing it on, like, kids? Like, if some people, like, can't tie their shoes yet, or, like, they can't even do, like, math at a grade 8 level, like, why are you introducing them to this stuff, etc., etc.? Like, why not just leave them alone, like, let them become 18 and then, like, they make their own decisions, and etc., etc. Like, if you want to just talk about it on even just that level, like, I have other reasons to disagree with it beyond just like the kind of base logic level of it or whatever, or base moral level. Like, there's the faith aspect and everything too. But like, you can just try to be reasonable with people, and hopefully reasonable people will respond reasonably. But now everything is so, like, hyperbolic, and tensions are so high on everything. It's like there's got to be like some sort of pressure release valve or something where we all got to just simmer down and chill out and just, like, be reasonable, like, human beings again. So hopefully we could try to find a way to do that. And I am going to leave that there. I'm going to try to get some more topics done here. I might do a couple topics per episode. We'll see what happens. But to sum it up, 5th generational warfare, probably a very real thing that we deal with in probably a variety of ways, and we may not even realize that we're dealing with it. And so be aware that information may be more powerful than nuclear weapons. That's not necessarily always true, but it's like, if you can convince the whole world to not have kids, then everything goes away in a generation. There's apparently enough nukes on the planet to, like, destroy it twice over. So both of those things are on a similar level of gravity. But regardless, both can be devastating, right? If all that's accurate. So, have the important conversations with people. Try, hopefully, if you see opportunities. And in some cases, if you don't, I can probably understand why, because sometimes it sucks and we're kind of tired of everything being a fight and we just want to live our lives or whatever. But at the same time, if we put off all these things continually, where do we get to? So, do what is right